So, our first talk of the morning is Ben Orenstein. And, you know, he's just this guy. Ben's been doing Ruby for 8 years. He works at Thoughtbot in Boston. He's the host of their award-winning, no, not award-winning podcast, Giant Robots Smashing into Other Giant Robots. Years of practice, in the shower mostly. Let's see, he got his start programming in QBasic, spent some time digging in the C code mines, and now he's here to talk to us about all the things that people ask him frequently. Hey, big hand for Ben.
Hello. Oh yeah, got some volume on this guy. How's everybody doing? Pretty good? Pretty good turnout for the morning after those badass parties. It's good to see all of you. You're looking well and wonderful. So I'd like to start with a really quick focus exercise if we could. So would you please, when my hands are like this, like when they're perfectly together, would you clap, please? Ooh, we have some eager people over there. I appreciate your enthusiasm. Not bad. Oh, that's better. Oh. Oh, thank you very much. Hold your applause, please, though. So I have a funny story to start with. So I went this morning to print my notes for this talk. And do you hear this paper? You can kind of hear that. So I went into the business center of the hotel and started printing, and there were these two women there that were also doing things. I didn't know what. And I printed out some stuff, and they go, "Oh my God, did you just print something?" And I said, "Yes." And they're like, "How many pages?" And I was like, "5." And they're like, "You just printed on our wedding stock." So like this like punches into helpful shapes and whatnot. So that was a cool start to the morning. So this is like the thickest paper I've ever used for talk notes, which means this talk is going to be awesome. I'm really excited. So as this talk starts, I want to let you know that everybody in this room has a job. So this talk is targeted at beginner and intermediate programmers. So if you are a beginner and intermediate programmer, your job is to listen and hopefully learn things. However, if you are an advanced programmer, your job is to listen and hopefully disagree with me. One of my favorite things is when smart people disagree with what I say and tell me why, and I get to learn and hear a new point of view. I love that. I think that's awesome. So if I say something you don't agree with, I'd love to hear about it. Shoot a hand up or just say it. My favorite thing in the world are questions during my talks. Ah, he doesn't agree. Perfect. My second favorite thing in the world is being heckled during talks. So feel free to throw it either. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So let's get started. So this talk is about the frequently asked questions I get as my job as a mentor as part of Thoughtbot's Learn service. So thank you. I like your shirt too. So I get asked, I do one-on-one mentoring with these people that are beginner to intermediate Rails developers. They're trying to get their first Rails job, get a better Rails job, launch their own app on the side. And I noticed that there are a number of questions that just come up over and over and over again. That's what this talk is about. And the first one is really core to our profession, which is how do I become a better programmer? And I love that question. And so I have a couple parts to my answer on this. And I think the best way to improve as a programmer is to pair with other programmers. And you notice I didn't say to pair with better programmers. Pairing with stronger programmers is awesome. I think that's probably, if you want to maximize, learning per hour, pairing with someone that knows more than you do is pretty much unbeatable. But it's also really, really useful to pair with people that are at your level or even below. And the reason is you learn things when you teach them. So if you are pairing with someone who's roughly at your level, you have this sort of Venn diagram here. You don't all know the same thing, but as you pair, you sort of intersect these more and more, which is nice, so you're swapping knowledge. And when you pair with someone that's not quite as strong as you, you get a chance to explain these things that you think you know, and then you get to find out that your knowing of them is actually fairly fuzzy. And this is actually really useful. This has caught me so many times. I'm like, no, we definitely want to do this. And like, why? And I'm like, that's a good question. And this is really useful for exposing things that you thought you really knew and you don't actually really know. You're just sort of parroting it, and no one's ever questioned you on it. And by the way, I think it's really important when this happens, when you discover, actually, I just told you something and I don't actually really understand it, it's important to admit that. It's tempting to sort of hide that fact. it's better to just get it out and say, actually, I don't really know. Let's find out together. And then you get to do a little exploration. So that's the first thing in improving as a programmer. Next thing, do plenty of struggling on your own. So pairing is great, but I still think you need to struggle on your own. And I use that word struggle intentionally. That's not an accident. So especially when you're a newer programmer, it's very likely that you might have doubts. You think, is this hard for just me, or is it hard for everybody? It's easy to doubt your own ability. And you look at other people and you think, do they just have more natural aptitude for this? And that's not the case. You struggle on your own because programming is hard. This is a hard job. It's a hard field. It's difficult. So don't doubt yourself. Do plenty of struggling on your own, but don't feel bad. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be hard. Don't beat yourself up over that. That's the way it's supposed to be. And this struggling part is important because you should be struggling. If when you're trying to improve at something and it's easy, you're not really improving, right? Your brain has a very easy time doing things it's always done. But when you're trying to learn a new thing, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be hard, and that's a good sign. Yeah?
Talking also about the advanced programmers as well, right?
Oh, sure, yeah. He asked if that applies to advanced programmers as well, and absolutely. Yeah, totally. It should be hard. If you feel like what you're doing is too easy, pick something new. Push yourself somewhere else. The next leg, so we have pair with others, we have do plenty of struggling on your own, and then I have admit when you don't understand something. This, I think, is one of my superpowers. About 2 years ago, I decided, you know what, as soon as I don't understand something, I'm going to admit it. I'm going to admit it aggressively, and I'm going to admit it immediately. And this has done amazing things for my learning. So I think in our industry, we're intellect-powered, right? Like the best measure, like the way we tend to measure each other is by like, how smart is that person, and how smart do they seem? And so there's this tremendous temptation to maintain a perception. And so when someone says something and you don't really understand it, or they reference something that you've never heard of, it's very tempting to be like, oh yeah, totally, yeah, I'm into that. Protocol buffers, those are awesome programming languages or whatever. It's very tempting, but don't do that. See, what you've traded then is for you said, I will create the temporary perception that I understand this. And what you've traded away instead is a permanent understanding. You could have just said, actually, what the heck are protocol buffers? I don't know. And then they would explain it to you, and then you'd move on. And so you've traded this permanent understanding for a temporary perception. And that's a lousy trade. By the way, there's a great heuristic for this. The more embarrassed you are to admit that you don't understand or something or aren't familiar with something, the more you need to admit that right away. What's a protocol buffer? That's an awesome question. I actually just learned this, and I picked this protocol buffer thing because I was having dinner with someone from Square, and she was like, blah, blah, protocol buffers, and I was like, what's protocol buffer? I was like, I've heard of this, but I don't know what it is. And I'm going to summarize roughly, because I spent 5 minutes talking to her about it, but it's so it's like JSON, so you want to store stuff in sort of a language agnostic format, right? So you could use JSON, and JSON's pretty good, except if you are Square and you're processing like 2 billion transactions per whatever, you want something really, really fast. It has to be really fast to parse, and it has to be really small so you can send it over the wire. And so protocol buffers are designed to sort of meet those design goals. So we have pair with others, do plenty of struggling on your own, admit when you don't understand something, and then finally, I want to talk about an evaluation heuristic. So we're talking about how you get better as a programmer, but how do you know if it's working? And the way I look if it's working is, I think the most important heuristic you can apply to code is, how easy is this to change later? So it's tempting to write some code and then look at it and say, how good is this code? And you can look at some things and you can figure some things out, but the true test of code comes later when you have to change it to do something new. And that's when you find out how good the code really is. And so what you should do is pay attention when you have to go back and change your code. And think at a higher level. Raise yourself up a level of awareness and think, is this easy or hard, and why? What is it about how I wrote this code a month ago that's making this easy to change or making it hard to change? And pay a lot of attention to that. By the way, this is often going to be duplication. And it's not usually going to be, so most people know, like, I shouldn't duplicate code. Like, they won't, like, cut and paste a method into a different class and just, like, cut and paste willy-nilly duplication. There's lots of subtle forms of duplication. Everybody here, I imagine, has heard of law of Demeter. If you haven't, go look it up. But law of Demeter is concerned with one kind of duplication, structural duplication, which is not quite as obvious as cutting and pasting, but is duplication nonetheless. So the reason that most code gets to be hard to change is because you've duplicated things, sometimes in subtle ways. And you can test if that's true, because imagine code was perfectly factored so that everything lived in exactly one place. If you need to make a change, you now make the change in exactly that one place, and you're done. So every time that's not true, you probably have duplication. So that's my heuristic for, are you improving as a programmer? Check your code, pay attention when you are needing to change it. Now I've talked a little bit, so what's that? Your tests are duplicates. Well, test code need to be dry too. That's actually a weird phenomenon I've noticed is with people that would never duplicate production code. They totally know, I totally get dry, it makes perfect sense, but I cut and paste my tests all day long. Test code is code too, man. Treat it nicely. Treat it better than production code because test code has no tests.
Testing for specific parameters out of testing that, for example, with the Rails call, when it emulates an action, you want to test multiple things about that, and rather than just tossing that in a before loop and testing the state, having an explicit test. That's duplication.
So I think the summary of his question was, is it okay to sometimes have duplication in test code for clarity, to make it more obvious what you're doing? I don't think so. I think you can get clarity without duplication. What's that? What's that? Oh, dry tests are hard to read? Oh man, I think, yeah, this guy disagrees and I also disagree. I think dry tests are easier to read. And if they're harder to read, then figure out why. Ask yourself why. I think duplicated tests are going to be so much harder to maintain. I think you're going to have a much harder time with those. I'll take dry tests over duplicated tests any day. Yeah? What do I define as a duplicated test? What is duplication? So duplication is any time you're repeating something. That's tough. So it's like, if I want to test, that when we go to this action in a controller, these certain things happen. But I want to test a bunch of things about that action. So one way is saying, every time, repeat that GET request with the params and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. That's duplication, right? We've duplicated how to do something in that case. So that's one kind of duplication, is like duplicate a process of something. You could also duplicate information, like the ID of, the magic plan that gives somebody a free subscription is 42. And so you put 42 in 6 different places in your code base. That's like duplication of knowledge. So the duplication I think we're talking about here is like a process. Duplicating, how do we get set up? How do we do the exercise phase and then before we do the verification phase? And my argument is I don't think you need to duplicate either of those in order to have good expressive tests. Do I have an example of a code base with tests that are dry and easy to understand? Some of the private stuff that I've written, yes. Let me think if I can find a public one. I'll give it a shot. Okay, so we've been talking a lot. I've been talking a lot, I should say. So let's look at a little something different. Can anybody tell me what this does? Yeah, we'll fix this. Don't look. That's better, right? Yeah.
You're missing the left edge.
Say it with confidence. I can't hear you.
Most frequently used command.
Yeah. This gives me my top 20 most frequently used shell commands. Let's run this and hope there's nothing incriminating in here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I just talked to you about ways of becoming a better programmer at sort of a macro level. This is something I believe in fairly deeply at a lower level, a detail level. Oh man, they're off the screen here. That's a bummer. Well, those are just counts on the left side. It's not important what they are. The important thing is the thing on the right-hand column, which are my commands. I think it's really important to avoid unnecessary typing. So my brain works at a certain number of operations per second. My computer works at like 2 billion operations per second or so. So when we have a time where I realize what I want the computer to do, and I spend time with my extremely slow fingers instructing it with what I want to do, and then I hit enter and it starts doing what I want to do, this whole thing in here is wasted time, right? There's no real value in here. If we could make this 1 nanosecond, we totally would in a heartbeat. And so I want to push towards that nanosecond all the time. And one way and I do this in a million different ways, but one way that I'm just showing you here is in the shell. So I'm pretty happy with this output right here because it looks like the things I type most often are very short. I care about stupid stuff like individual keystrokes. My most commonly run command is G, which is basically a function that serves as git, but does some sort of fanciness sometimes. Hilariously, my second most used thing is git, which is dumb, right? So one thing that I need to do that I've done for other things is I'm going to alias git to echo use G, you idiot, to remind me that I have this shortcut. I've done this with other things. Vim, that's not so bad, but it could be V, right? That's an alias. That's an easy pickup. CD, fine. I'm pretty happy with this next section here. GAD is git add dot. GCM is git commit with message. Code goes to my code directory. GD is git diff. Git checkout. GG is git history. U goes to my users directory. G push. That's GP now. That should be even better on my. That's better on my work machine. A is alias to ls-lrth or whatever sort of long string I have. That's actually my favorite alias. But I'm aggressive about this thing. I check this history, and I'm trying to alias aggressively. And this shows up in my Vim. I have like 95 leader commands in Vim. I have a lot of shell things. I write a lot of little functions in the shell. I think this is actually an important part of being of speeding yourself up over time. This is like one of those like legs of the stool. It's like you can just kind of always be shaving off time, shaving off keystrokes that are all wasted. And this is my personal thing. I think it's worth. Most people could spend a little more time on this, I think.
Hey, Ben?
Yeah.
How do you defend against it's like a typo is much more dangerous when you have fewer characters that matter.
Yeah, Josh is saying, oh, like that might screw something up? Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting question. Josh is saying, like, if you have really short commands, a typo could really potentially screw you. That's a good question. I mean, RVM is pretty close to RM, and I've never done that. Why is gpush dangerous?
Well, if you would actually change something, the rest you could reverse.
Yeah. Most of these I'm not too afraid of. I don't have any very short commands for like rm-rf on slash or anything like that. I probably wouldn't alias that. Actually, that's not true. One time, why did I do this? I can't remember, but I recorded some Vim leader command that like highlighted the whole file and deleted it and wrote it. But I can't for the life of me remember why. I think it was like a file of output, and I wanted to like continuously blow it away so I could see the new output or something. What's that? How do I?
It's how you test your tests. Blow away your implementation that you failed.
Oh, I like that. What's up?
Things like this and Emacs control medical file stuff. You know, I wonder how it works in impairing.
Yeah, so he says, the question was more or less, how does this work out in pairing? It's a huge pain. It sucks. I'm the worst person to pair with in the world because I use Dvorak. Other Dvorak people? Yeah. Awesome. So I use Dvorak, which is a pain. I alias aggressively, which is a pain. I remap caps lock to escape, which is a pain. I have crazy amounts of Vim leader commands that are completely burned in my neural pathways, and you will never get them out of there. So like when I start pairing with someone, the first thing I'll do is define a few leader commands that are my core essential ones in their Vim, just temporarily. It's.
You're one of those people who comes to visit and turns the toilet paper to the other orientation.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely correct. That's totally me.
So I alias a ton, and I'm doing a lot of DevOps now, so I'm on a lot of different servers all the time.
I knew I was going to get this question.
So I actually find that it's good for me because then I remember. I mean, I keep on both sides, so I compare as well as use.
So he's saying he aliases a ton but does DevOps now, and so he's on machines where he doesn't have his own environment. But it's useful because you get both. You get the ones when you're on your home machine, but you also remember how to do everything. I hate remembering stuff, so I'm glad I don't work on a bunch of machines. Can't you also just set up one command that pulls in your thing and sources it and gives you everything you want? Kinda. People always say this about heavy customization. Well, I work on a bunch of machines. Like, well, first of all, damn, that sucks. But what's that? Yeah, you can if you just Google if you Google show last 10 shell commands or something, this will come up. There's nothing fancy here, besides the awk ugliness. I didn't write this. I stole it off the internet, obviously.
Then you have git add dot, right, which is add everything in the current directory.
Yeah.
Git add all. Do you know about that?
No.
It's cool because it will actually make it better reflect what's actually happening, like deleted files, those will get synced up right and stuff like that. It's even cooler than just adding the current directory.
Is this like git add -u? Is this the same thing?
Add -- all, I think.
Okay, look into git add -- all. That sounds useful.
Yeah.
Awesome. -A, same deal? Cool, thank you. Thank you for pairing with me and teaching me stuff. Awesome. Okay, so just a quick question. Do we have any people here that are looking for their first Ruby job that haven't gotten a Ruby job yet? Whoa, fewer than I thought. Okay, so, yeah, good. First of all, hire that guy. He's been heckling me very well. I like you. Okay. Yeah. So this is San Francisco, so you all change jobs like every 9 months, right? So we'll skip this. We'll skip this one because we don't need to cover it. Because we don't have as many people here that are looking for their first job. That's fine. And I get to punch out my wedding. Awesome. So I will take one thing from that section that I was going to cover, which is, I think one of the most important things that people neglect when they is keeping friends in the community. My last 3 jobs have come through friends. I think the best jobs in the world never get posted anywhere. They get passed through word of mouth. Words of mouths. Mouth words. They get passed through mouth words. You can quote me on that. So I think it's really important to maintain friendships. Not like sleazy, obnoxious friendships, but like real friendships. People that live near you and that work on Ruby and that you like and that you want to spend time with. Because it's great because they can look at your code, they can offer input, and they can help you, they'll let you know, like, hey, we're hiring, or like my friend says they're hiring at this awesome place. It's great to stay connected. And so I want to give you one quick thing, which is please turn to your left or right, and whichever person you know less well, would you just turn and introduce yourself and say, hey, how's it going? And I'm Okay. So, that worked well. You guys are a sociable bunch. Excellent. Good work. Good work. Now I have a question for you. How many of you, truthfully, have already forgotten the name of the person you just talked to? All right, so if your hand is up, please turn to the person and just get their name one more time. And those of you that lied, please also do it. Good. Excellent. Now, so that was great. You guys really like each other. So that was great. Now also, make sure you have an important job, which is the next time you see that person, go like, hey, name, how's it going? Good to see you again. You've probably already forgotten the name again. So think of a little mnemonic in your head. Like how you're going to remember when you see that face. What about that is going to lead to that name? Like, I'm Big Ben or something stupid like that. Some sort of mnemonic. Anyway, remember it. Say hi to them the next time you see them. And keep it up. That's great. So I want to talk about money. So one question I get often from people is, do you think I'm underpaid? And my answer to that is, yes, you are underpaid. And the reason I say that is because if you think you're underpaid, you are. You are correct. If you feel that the value you provide to your company is not being met by your salary, you are underpaid, regardless, to me, of market conditions. So most people are really shy about asking for more money. This is, I think, one of my other superpowers, is like I sort of got over this a few years ago, and like I'm like kind of obnoxious about it. But it works really well. It's often shocked me how often I ask for something and people just give it to me. It really kind of blows me away. Like things that I think are totally ludicrous, I've sometimes gotten, and it's awesome. And yes. This guy it doesn't have a job, so yes, I will give you $20. I can't give you a job. Maybe I could. I don't know. Yes, so there's this weird thing where people don't want to ask for it, that they feel uncomfortable. And the only thing you need to know is all you have to do is pass the giggle test. Do you guys know what the giggle test is? The giggle test is you have to be able to say a number or ask for what you want and not laugh out loud. And you also, it goes the other side, like you have to have them not laugh out loud, which I have failed at recently, if I'm being honest. I'm being totally honest, I have failed at that recently. So you got to figure out where that thing is. Where can you like keep a straight face and like say that like I believe I am worth this much money, and not like kind of lose it or have them lose it. Oh, it's brutal. You asked for a number too low? Oh yeah. See, so this guy says that he's had someone laugh because he asked for a number too low, which actually his. So when I got my very first job, they asked me how much I wanted to make, and it was a salaried position. And I was like, this much per hour? And she was like, we actually talk in annual salary amounts, so maybe you want to not be terrible at this. And then they gave me like 3,000 more than I asked for, which means I totally blew it. Right? If you ask for something and you get more, oh my God, did you blow it? If you ask for something and you get it, you blew it again, actually. If you ask for something and they say no, yes, you've got it. So you want to be inside the giggle range, but like ask for more than they're willing to give you. This is how you maximize value, which is only one thing, but money is kind of important. You don't want to feel undervalued. The most important thing a salary can do for you is make you forget about it. You want to just be able to say, I'm compensated fairly, it's enough, it's worth it, I don't want to think about it. When it grates on you, you're underpaid, regardless of what the numbers look like. So there's this weird thing around salaries where we don't talk about it with our coworkers, right? So like most people don't know how much their coworkers make, but your boss knows how much your coworkers make. And so there's this weird information asymmetry. So let's say I'm $15,000 below market value, and everyone else on the team is paid at market value. I'm down here, and I go to my boss, and I'm like, I will not stand for this. I think I'm below my market value. I want a $5,000 raise. Boss thinks this is totally fine. He's still like, I still have plenty of room in the budget. He's still way below, but that's okay. I'm going to give him 6 and make him happy, and this will be great. And so it seems like I won this negotiation, but I really lost by leaving money on the table. And the problem is information asymmetry. So economists have studied this, and they have proven with science that information asymmetry, the side that knows more has an advantage in a negotiation. So when you know less, you're at a disadvantage. Why did they use science? Why do they need science? Well, because, I mean, how do you prove it, right? I don't know. I asked my friend who's a PhD in economics, I was like, have this been proven? He's like, yeah. So I'm citing a friend of mine, so don't like write a paper on this or anything ridiculous. Don't quote me on this one. And so this information asymmetry hurts you. It's good for your employer. It's bad for you. So I think we should try to break down these walls of like we don't talk about our salary with each other. So I think you should start with your closest friends at work and be like, hey, I think we should do this thing where we tell each other about how much we're making, and I think it might help both of us. I'm gonna get in a lot of trouble for this, but but I think this is a good idea. I think you should start sharing your salary information because I think it will help you. And all it's doing is bringing you up to parity with what your company already knows. You're just not at a disadvantage anymore. By the way, the US government agrees with me on this. Your right to share your salary information with your coworkers is protected by law. It's actually protected by an old law because it was designed to allow unions to do collective bargaining. So if you're a company and you don't want a union to be able to form, you say, I'm putting as part of your contract that you may not talk to each other about the details of your compensation. And now you can't form a union and do collective bargaining on behalf of everyone because you can't share salary negotiation. So there's actually a law, it's a really old one, but it says employers cannot prevent their employees from sharing details of their compensation. Yeah. He's saying if you're a consultant, that's not legal. That may be true. I'm not sure what the protections are for consultants, and I mean, check with a lawyer if you want to, but I am not a lawyer. So do that. It'll be good for you. Haha, see, so actually a good question. So he asked me how much I make. I'll tell you in private, but here's the thing. Your right to tell the details of your compensation to the public is not protected. And I don't know if this would hold up in court, but couldn't an employer potentially make the case that revealing the details of your compensation is in fact sharing like a trade secret of your company? I think maybe they could. And I would love to just blast out my number to you guys. I totally would. But I actually need to check if that's okay first, because I think that is not protected. If you were all my coworkers, I would just shout it, but But thanks for asking. That takes guts to ask, and I like people that have guts. All right. We got 1 minute. So I'm going to cover just this one last thing, which is, how do I learn TDD? I get asked this question all the time. TDD is kind of like Vim, that it has this reputation of being super hard and scary. I'm not sure why I picked that up. I've lost touch with what it is to be a beginner to TDD because I've done it so long, but for some reason it kind of freaks people out and they get really worried. I think the main part of this worry is because they think it's an all or nothing thing. Like, as of September 21st, I now do test-driven development, and therefore I will never write code without a test again. And that's a scary thing to say. And what happens is they start writing, and then they get kind of stuck. Like, I don't know how to test this. And they're like, oh, God, I'm doomed. And then they kind of just abandon the practice. And they talked about it with me in a mentoring session. So my message for that is, A, it's not too bad. B, you can do it. And C, some tests are better than no tests. Sometimes I'm trying to test something, and it's too hard, and I do an evaluation. I say, is the benefit of this test greater than the amount of time I'm about to spend on it? And sometimes I say no, and I leave code untested. I know this is going to shock you. But it doesn't happen very often. This is probably like 0.5% of the time, but it happens. So it's okay to leave some things untested if it's brutally hard. I recommend you go to find somebody that will help you test it. That's even better. Push through, be strong, be awesome, but it's okay if you leave 1 or 2 things untested. I have one last plug for you guys. So if this stuff has seemed useful, we have this, I've mentioned this earlier, we have ThoughtBot's Learn service. I do one-on-one mentoring with people. We have workshops and screencasts and ebooks. It's all about this stuff that I've been talking about today. I have a discount code for you guys. It's GoGaRuCo, all capital letters. It's $15 off your first month if you subscribe. And I may even be your mentor, and we'll be talking all the time on Skype. But thank you very much.
Great.